What's up, guys? This is Holland with the Wolverine.com, back with another Wolverine live show, our Wednesday recruiting chats where I answer all of your questions. So make sure to dive into the chat box and ask a question or just post a comment, leave some love. Always appreciate that. Yesterday's show was our super chat show with Zach Libby. Today I am flying solo dolo. Super chats are appreciated. You can click the donate button. That money goes directly to my travel budget and allows you to skip ahead in the line for questions. Some quick promos before we really start going tonight. Subscribe to the Wolverine.com today for just $29.99 until August 31st of this year. That gets you premium recruiting inside information, team information, basketball recruiting, NIL transfer portal, and so much more. Plus, a great message board community over on the Fort. Come join the discussion with your fellow Michigan fans. All of that is just $29.99 until August 31st. And of course, that gets you through the end of basketball season, spring football, and the summer official visit period. So, take advantage of this special limited time offer. It will be going away soon. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We drop content basically on the daily, and that is completely free. Liking the video helps me get in front of other Michigan fans, helps us populate the chat, and helps us have a good time on Wednesday night. So appreciate you guys for joining me as always. I think that is it for all the promotional content. All right, let's go ahead and get into your questions, guys. That is what we are here for. And let's go with Indigo Ronan. And he says, EJ, what are your thoughts/feelings on Montrez Walker's commitment on Saturday? So, Walker is a big time linebacker out of Georgia in the 2025 recruiting class out of Peach State powerhouse Buford. He is set to make his decision on Saturday. So really early for a 2025 recruit to be making a decision. But hey, that didn't stop Chris Ewald from committing to Michigan earlier this cycle. And as you see here, Walker does not have a rating just yet. South Carolina is considered the leader on the on-3 prediction machine. I have not put in a pick, and I don't think I will be putting a pick solely because of some background things that we are working on. But I will share that I think Michigan should be the leader on the on-3 recruiting prediction machine. If I had to put in a prediction today, it would be Michigan. Michigan hosted Walker for an unofficial visit in January. Some of you guys might remember him as the recruit that was in Jim Harbaugh's office where that picture went viral. With Jim Harbaugh's book about Ohio State that was filled with blank pages. But Walker is a great player in his own right. He's a little on the short side at 5'11", 215 pounds, but a really athletic inside backer. Has some time to maybe grow a couple of inches. Always great to get a kid out of Buford. Sets up the stage for what's to come at that school. A lot of elite talent coming out of Buford, and I think landing a kid like Walker kind of gets Michigan's foot in the door. And Michigan has been making the state of Georgia a huge priority. Michigan defensive coordinator Jesse Minters has spent a lot of time there, including in January. A lot of weeks in the state of Georgia. Co-defensive coordinator Steve Klinkscale has been down there. Michigan offensive coordinator Sharon Moore has been down there. And there you see the picture of Jim Harbaugh with the book and Montrez Walker as well. Jim Harbaugh personally made a stop at Buford in January as well. So a lot of coaches have been through the program, have been in Georgia. They want to start pulling in more top talent out of the Peach State on a more consistent basis. And Walker would be a great addition in 2025. Now, some people have said, what does it matter? There could be a lot of things that happen over the next 2 years, but getting a guy like Montrez Walker right now, I mean, you definitely don't pass him up, and you pair him with Chris Ewald, and that's two big-time guys out of the Southeast. So I think Michigan's in a great spot heading into his decision, and that kind of segues us into our next question from Jack Hells, who says, when Walker gets a ranking, how do you think he will be ranked? I think his offer sheet pretty much says 4-star guy. I think his film is pretty good for a sophomore as well. Like I said, there are a little bit of concerns with his height. Not as concerned since he's more of a pure inside linebacker and does have time to add a couple of inches, but I do think that he will likely start off as a 4-star prospect. He has a very impressive offer sheet. He's been a playmaker at a power program in Georgia, so that would make a lot of sense. Jack Hells has another question, and he says, what are Michigan's odds of landing Brandon Davis Swain? So Davis Swain, an on 300 defensive lineman out of West Bloomfield in Michigan's own backyard. Davis Swain visited Michigan a couple of times in the fall. He is a former Notre Dame commit. He is a guy that, again, is out of West Bloomfield, which has been very friendly to Michigan, producing guys like Makari Page, Donovan Edwards, Samaj Morgan, Amir Herring, and, of course, the former coach there is Michigan wide receivers coach Ron Bellamy. With Davis Swain, he's one of the more interesting storylines to follow this cycle, in my opinion. Now, Davis Swain's not exactly a true scheme fit for what Michigan does. He's a little undersized at 6'2.5", 240 pounds. I don't necessarily think he's an edge rusher. I think he's the best fit for Davis Swain is probably in the Chris Jenkins role. I'm not sure how much weight he can add, but I think a lot of the same things were said about Chris Jenkins as well. And Jenkins is pretty much approaching 300 pounds. So if Brandon Davis Swain can get up to that type of weight, I think he can fill that type of role, but he's a bit of a tweener. With all that said, he is a really good football player. I wrote that he was one of the more impressive kids I saw at the Under Armour camp in Ohio last year, but I just didn't know where he fit in, right? And it's kind of the same thing now is I don't know where he really fits in, but he is a really good football player. He's productive at West Bloomfield. He's always a top performer at camps as well. So I'm interested to see where exactly he sits on the board, where exactly he fits in, but he definitely has high interest in the program. Like I said, a lot of connections, has made multiple visits. There are some other schools that are high on the list as well. He's coming off a visit to Colorado that went really, really well. Some of the other Big Ten programs interested too. So I think we'll have to wait and see with Brandon Davis Swain. I think we'll have to wait and see how much Michigan prioritizes him and how he sees himself as a fit in Michigan's defensive scheme as well. Let's go down to Buzzer, and he says, they said there would be some NIL news soon. Did I miss something? Any idea what this is? Would we ever hire an NIL director to help with recruiting? Okay, so a lot of questions here. Let's go. Let's get the hire out of the way. Would Michigan ever hire an NIL director to help with recruiting? I know they made an NIL compliance hire, which technically does help with recruiting in the fall, but not a lot of information on the intricacies of that position. Now, will they get an NIL director that deals with certain recruits? I'm not sure that's really Michigan's style, but I think in this day and age of college football, you kind of need a department, an NIL department, in the same way you need a recruiting department. It is just completely taken over. So interested to see if Michigan goes that route. In terms of NIL news coming soon, yeah, we've been waiting for it for a while. It's been soon since last July or something like that. I mean, every time there's a new report, it's soon, and it's never here it is. And look, NIL is extremely complicated. Nobody has it figured out, but Michigan has had an idea of what it's wanted to do, which is having more of a base salary model. And that's not necessarily, game changing by any means. Schools have done it and already have it in place. You see smaller level schools like my alma mater, SMU, Texas Tech, those schools have base salary models in place already. So it's nothing that would be completely new or, like I said, game changing or groundbreaking or anything of that nature. Now, I do think that Michigan can do the base salary model at a much higher level than a school like Texas Tech or a school like SMU. There's a lot more money coming in to a program like Michigan. Now, that's not necessarily pay for play. It's not like Miami that's like, hey, recruit will give you $500,000 up front and then pay you $100,000 for every year you stay on campus. It's not that. What it is, if you are a player, a scholarship player on Michigan's roster, you are guaranteed a certain amount of money. And it's usually lined up by position group. So let's say the tight ends, let's say they make a base salary of $50,000. So that's $200,000 over 4 years. That's something you can sell that's concrete to a tight end recruit. You can say, hey, if you're a tight end at Michigan, you're guaranteed to make $200,000 as long as you're on the roster and you stay for 4 years. If you stay for 3 years, that's $150,000 guaranteed, plus outside deals. Here's an example of a deal that Colston Loveland just signed with the automotive dealership, right? So that's something concrete that you can sell that Michigan doesn't really have right now. Right now on the recruiting trail, it's more so, hey, transformational over transactional. Here's what JJ's made. Here's what Blake's made. And it's nothing really concrete that you can sell. The base salary model would allow Michigan to sell that. Now, that's not necessarily going to be on par with the Miamis and the Texas A&Ms on the world, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Michigan wants to keep its culture. So if they are able to find high-level kids that buy in to the Michigan mold, like what Michigan offers from a development standpoint and academic standpoint, and just being a Michigan man in general, then I do think that Michigan can put together classes that are in the same range as Penn State and Notre Dame, which is what Michigan should be doing to begin with. Michigan is obviously more successful than those programs on the field as well. And I think, in my opinion, has a lot more to offer. So I think the base salary model can work at a place like Michigan, and you can pull the right type of high level kids. In terms of what the big news is that keeps, I guess people keep saying soon. It is supposed to be a deal with a major agency, and that is supposed to open the door for the base salary model to be put into place. I'm sick and tired. You guys appearing soon as well. It needs to get done now. Look, the winter recruiting dead period is coming to an end at the end of this month. March 1st marks the beginning of spring on the football recruiting calendar. So by March 1st, the dead period's over. Kids can make visits again. And then into April is the spring evaluation period, which allows coaches to get on the road and really sell the program. So going into March, going into April, you have to have a concrete NIL plan, man. You can't have the same situation as last cycle, or you're going to lose guys at the end. You're going to lose silent commits, and you're going to have maybe not as disappointing of a class. This class is off to a much better start than 2023, but you're going to be wondering what could have been. So I think having that base salary model is extremely important, and hopefully it does get done soon. It makes my life easier. It makes your lives easier. It makes Jim Harbaugh's life easier. He's been pushing for the base salary model for a while. So don't think this is Jim not getting it done. He's been wanting to get this done for a long time. Let's go to Mark Valentine, and he says, is Partridge an on-field coach? So obviously Michigan bringing back Chris Partridge for another go-around in Ann Arbor. It does look like he will be an on-the-field coach. I saw some reports that he could be taking over Biff's spot or something in that role. But as things stand right now, we are expecting a departure. Don't really want to report too much there. That's more for the team guys to report. But in terms of Partridge, I think you're getting an excellent recruiter. Obviously, a guy that has landed several top 100 recruits dating back to his time at Michigan, a guy that's extremely well connected along the East Coast, especially in New Jersey. I think he's going to give Michigan a great recruiting boost, and is similar in the aggressive recruiting personalities that are on staff now, like a Ron Bellamy, like Steve Klinkscale, like Sharon Moore. So I think he's a great fit from a recruiting perspective as well. Let's go down to Go Blue 81. Do you think that the fact that Walker White committed to Auburn over Clemson will hurt our chances of getting Jayden Davis? I don't know, man. Clemson's One, they're a weird school. They don't really put out a lot of offers. They're very strict with information coming out of the program. So I've seen some reports that Clemson doesn't feel like they have a super legit shot at Jayden Davis. And there you see Walker White's profile made a surprising commitment to Auburn when a lot of people had him penciled in. Walker White, a great prospect in his own right. But Jayden Davis, obviously, the focus here for Michigan fans. Look, I think there's just conflicting information on Clemson and their pursuit of Jayden Davis. Some say that Clemson doesn't feel like there's a great shot at Jayden Davis. But if you're a school competing against Michigan for a top 100 recruit, I don't think there should necessarily be a ton of fear in competing against Michigan. And that's not necessarily a diss against Michigan. Schools should fear Michigan, but with NIL, such an important factor these days, especially for top 100 recruits, I think more and more schools are willing to recruit Michigan leans, recruit kids that are already committed to Michigan. So that those reports are interesting to me. I do know that Dabo was at his high school last month. Garrett Riley saw him at a throwing session. So they obviously like Jayden Davis. They like some other quarterbacks as well, including Jake Merklinger out of Georgia, who could be the guy. I don't know. They could like Jake Moore. They could like Jayden Davis more. I think we'll know a lot more about Clemson and their pursuits of quarterbacks after the February dead period. I think we'll see once kids are allowed to visit campus again and things like that, and coaches are allowed to get on the road in April. I think we'll have a better idea of how hard Clemson is really going to push for Jayden Davis. He is still the guy for Michigan. I do think Kirk Campbell has done a nice job, and we talked about it on yesterday's show, of putting together some contingency plans. We do know he has reached out to fellow top 100 quarterback Michael Van Buren. He's given some other 24 quarterbacks some follows on social media as well. So they are at least preparing to potentially expand the board if Jayden Davis keeps bulking on a timeline. But I'm still not necessarily concerned about Clemson, but I am still monitoring Clemson. I think the school that is recruiting Davis the hardest and has been as consistent as Michigan is North Carolina. I'm interested to, which again is not a really scary threat. I'm interested to see what Ohio State does. There's been some burned bridges there. I'm not sure how open Davis is to Ohio State, or what Ohio State is going to do at the quarterback position after losing Dylan Raiola earlier this cycle. Now, remember, there are burned bridges because it looked like Jayden Davis was gearing up to pick Ohio State before they decided to take Raiola instead, and so obviously that's caused some awkwardness in that recruitment. But Ryan Day was also at Jayden Davis's high school in January. So still some moving parts here until Jayden Davis sets a firm decision date. I think we're still going to have some worry in that recruitment, especially again in the age of NIL and specifically with quarterbacks. But I still feel like Michigan leads here. Is there a chance that he does set a decision date before spring? Yeah, I mean, look, the opportunity's there for him at Michigan. He's grown close with J.J. McCarthy. Jim Harbaugh is obviously staying and no longer flirting with the NFL. Even though Matt Weiss is gone, I don't think that's really a big factor. Kirk Campbell has already reached out there, and I think things are fine on that end. So Michigan still makes the most sense in this recruitment. We're just going to have to wait and see. And that transitions us into our next from N7 Ropey, and he says, "Hey EJ, do you think Jayden Davis may have his eye elsewhere? His hesitancy to commit has me a bit worried. Would love to see us pursue Van Buren a bit more." And look, I mean, I think we're all a tad bit worried about Jayden Davis until he actually commits. I mean, this is a guy that's gone from a December timeline to no timeline, and that is a little worrisome. Like I said, I think Michigan leads in this recruitment. But I do think Michigan should expand the board, and I said that for a while for a couple of reasons. One, you want to have options. You don't want another Dante Moore situation where you're just left there with no options. And two, there is no pressure for Jayden Davis to really commit right now. Michigan's always going to want him. The spot's always going to be there, and there's going to be no other quarterbacks on the board as things stand now. If you pursue a Michael Van Buren and other quarterbacks, then and don't just limit yourself to Michael Van Buren. When I say expand the board, I don't just mean to go after Michael Van Buren. I mean to go after a handful of other quarterbacks that you have highly graded. So I think going after quarterbacks applies a little pressure. Like, hey, Jayden Davis, you still have your spot. You're still our guy, but we have to make some other plans just in case. And I think that may give Jayden maybe an additional nudge to commit. And look, we have a big super chat coming in from Nick, and he gives a $9.99 super chat, so he gets to skip the line and get his question answered immediately. So shout out to Nick. There's our Ric Flair gift. Great job by our producer Hutch. He's awake today and on the ball. And Nick says, I don't see Jayden Davis signing with Michigan. Someone with pay for play will swoop in, and it will become a big factor, making Michigan not being able to compete. I'm higher on Van Buren anyway. Look, I hear you, Nick, but who's willing to pay for Jayden Davis right now? You look, Georgia already has Ryan Puglisi. They're going after Dylan Raiola. They just offered Jake Merklinger. So I'm not sure Georgia's willing to pay. Is Tennessee willing to pay after all that money they dished out to Nico last cycle? I don't think so. LSU already has their quarterback commit. I mean, who's really out there that's pursuing Jayden Davis hard that's willing to pay? Maybe someone will come in. Maybe you'll see a school like a Miami or Oregon, which is recruiting Michael Van Buren, come in with a pay for play offer, and things could change. But as things stand right now, I'm not overly concerned about pay for play because there isn't a school that involved. But with Jayden Davis waiting, I can see why you're concerned. And look, I love Michael Van Buren as well. I think when comparing Michael Van Buren to Jayden Davis, there isn't that much of a difference, right? I think when you look at Van Buren, he has a higher floor. He's more of a threat with his legs. I think that Jayden Davis is a safer passer and has a higher floor. He's not as dangerous in a take in the sense that you know what you're getting. He's a really safe guy. Van Buren's a guy that could be at the Bryce Young type level, or he could be a guy that's extremely hindered by his lack of height. I love Michael Van Buren. I tend to side that he will maybe not be Bryce Young, but gravitate more towards his upside as opposed to his low floor. Jayden Davis is just a safe take all the way. So I think it's just a matter of preference. But I think Michael Van Buren makes a lot of sense. I think Puglisi with Georgia looking around for another quarterback. Hey, Puglisi, come give Michigan a look. I think he makes a lot of sense. I like Ryan Puglisi as well. I know we've talked so much about Michael Van Buren, but Puglisi would make a lot of sense if Georgia does take another quarterback and he doesn't want to be part of a 2-quarterback cycle. There's some other guys out there as well. Jaden Bradford down at IMG Academy has a very similar game to Jayden Davis. I think he'd be an option as well. So we'll see. And that gives us Buzzer, who is also in the same range or the same, I guess, category. And he says, any thoughts on a commitment date for Jayden Davis? There is no commitment date for Jayden Davis. I mean, he's always said, or not always, but recently he has said it's when the time is right. Remember, it was initially December, and then there was a report out there that it would be January, and January has come and gone. With no decision date set in February, I have said in the past that this is a recruitment that could go into spring. So we'll see once the February winter dead period comes to an end if Jayden Davis is still out on the open market, but nothing definitive in terms of an actual commitment date. Let's go down to JR, and he says, is King Edwards an NIL kid, or does Michigan have a chance? So King Joseph Edwards, top 100 edge out of Buford, same school as Montrez Walker, has visited Michigan in the past. Without getting too much into it, I think there are a lot of moving parts with King Joseph Edwards. I would probably bet on him ending up elsewhere as opposed to Michigan. Like I said, a fluid situation that I don't want to get too much into, but Michigan is a factor. If the moving parts are resolved, then maybe I could see him at Michigan. I know he really likes the program. I know his mother really likes the program, but still a fluid situation there. Go Blue 81. And he says, happy to see Jordan Marshall put Michigan in his top 4 and scheduled visit. I think he wants to commit on the 4th of July. Yeah, Jordan Marshall's not big recruiting guy. He's not really in the headlines a ton. He doesn't do a ton of interviews either. Landing Jordan Marshall is absolutely important. Look, Jordan Marshall and Taylor Tatum are the clear top 2 guys on Michigan's running back board. I think Jordan Marshall is a little bit more realistic because he is a Midwest kid, because proximity. And here you see his top 4 graphics. So it's down to Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio State, and Tennessee. I think Tennessee is the school I'm the least worried about. I think he does stay in the Midwest. Ohio State, obviously being the home state program, the Buckeyes usually have gotten who they've wanted in terms of top tier guys in Ohio, but Michigan has worked hard to change that. Wisconsin just hired away his high school coach, so I think the Badgers will be a factor here as well. I think Michigan's done a great job so far. Mike Hart has developed a really good relationship with him. Marshall doesn't need the rah-rah relationship building, which I think fits in well with Mike Hart's approach on the recruiting trail. I also think that Michigan's running back production is definitely helping in this recruitment. When you have guys like Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum, that's definitely an easy sell. You will get your carries at Michigan if you're a top level back, which Jordan Marshall is. So he definitely sees himself as a scheme fit and sees opportunity. There isn't a ton behind Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum. I think CJ Stokes is serviceable. Benjamin Hall has a big question mark. Cole Cabana is a guy that could surprise as an air down back, but I see him more as an athlete type. So a lot to like about Jordan Marshall as a true every down back. Since Mike Hart has been here, he has not landed an elite every down back. So again, Jordan Marshall is one of the must lands, in my opinion, this cycle. And I think Michigan is right up there. I think any of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Ohio State can win this. Maybe Tennessee if they really get rolling with their NIL pitches, but I think this is a pretty even race heading into his visit. So really interested to see what comes out of it. But Michigan has done as good of a job as you can do. And Marshall was on campus for a game in the fall and was back for another visit in January. Go Blue 81 has another question, and he says, do I think that Campbell can recruit the top of the top quarterbacks like Bryce Underwood or Ryan Montgomery? He's already off to a better start than Matt Weiss. I will tell you that much. He has been a lot more proactive than Weiss. He has been able to get around the contact rules for 2025 and has been in touch with Underwood, Montgomery, Cutter Boley, Stone Saunders. So he has been proactive with the 25 quarterbacks. Look, Campbell's just an unknown commodity on the recruiting trail. He's never really had to do a whole lot of it. At Penn State, in his staffer role, he didn't do much recruiting. And even as an offensive coordinator at Old Dominion, I was told that he didn't do a ton on the recruiting trail either. So I think being around guys like Sharon Moore and Ron Bellamy on the offensive side of the ball will definitely help him, and those guys will help guide him. Ultimately, I'm not too concerned about Kirk Campbell. I think Campbell just needs to do what he's doing right now. Just stay in contact with guys, build relationships with guys better than Weiss did, and let Jim Harbaugh handle the rest. When it comes to elite quarterbacks, I think much like Jayden Davis, it doesn't matter too much who the quarterback's coach is. It matters how involved Jim Harbaugh is and how much of an impression he can make. So it will be up to Jim Harbaugh to win the recruitments of Bryce Underwood and Ryan Montgomery. Kirk Campbell just has to navigate the ship. Go Blue 81 has another question, and he says, also with Tommy Rees leaving for Alabama, any chance we get in on CJ Carr if we miss with Jayden Davis? Short answer, probably not. I think there's been some moving parts there, and I'm not sure Michigan valued him as much. Let's go down to Jack Hels. Oh, no, we had a super chat. I accidentally sent it away. Ray J coming in with a $4.99 super chat. There we go. Ric Flair on the screen. So Ray J says, get out of here, other person, with your question. It is my time. And he says, after watching both their highlights, I'd rather have Marshall than Tatum because of his physical style. Do you think we could pull off getting both? I think getting both will be extremely difficult. But if a place can get both, it is Michigan just because of the nature of the offense. You've seen other top tier schools land two highly touted backs. Alabama's done it in the past. Georgia's done it in the past. So it's not unfathomable, but it is difficult. I do think they would complement each other well. Like you mentioned, Marshall has a more physical style. Tatum, I think, is a more explosive athlete, a faster athlete, a guy that's really versatile as well. And for that reason, I'd prefer Taylor Tatum over Jordan Marshall. But like I said earlier, I think Marshall is maybe the more realistic of the two given proximity. But I think Michigan's done a great job with Taylor Tatum as well. He paid on his own dime to come to Michigan last month, had a great time on his visit, has connected well with Mike Hart. Remember, Taylor Tatum doubles as an elite baseball player, so he's connected well with the Michigan baseball staff, and I expect Michigan to get one of his official visits as well. So not out of the realm of possibilities, but will be tough for Mike Hart and company to accomplish. All right, guys, we've hit the 30-minute mark. Let's go rapid fire. Jack Hell says, do you think we land Jeremiah Beasley? I think Michigan has a legitimate shot there. Obviously, his half-brother Malik Carr plays for Michigan State, so a lot of people picking the Spartans. Penn State, a big contender there. But I think Michigan has done a great job with him. He has a great connection with the coaching staff, including co-defensive coordinator Steve Klingscale, as well as some of the commits like Jacob Oden. So we shall see. Any updates on Justin Scott from Illinois? The crystal balls to ND is concerning, says Newber. The crystal balls to Notre Dame were concerning since Justin Scott was planning to visit there right before making a commitment, but he has pushed back his commitment date, and that means Michigan will have a fair chance to get right back in it, and I do think they will. Let's go down to JR, and he says next 24 commit coming before or after the spring game. So the spring game is April 1st, which I'll be there, by the way, making the flight out there. So excited to see you guys again. But I'm going to say before. There's a long time before the spring game. I think they get somebody in for sure. Let's go down to Luther Sanders. He says, what are the top guys on the OL board that we are in the mix with? So off the top of my head, legacy recruit Blake Frazier is a priority. I think you'll see him back on campus this spring. Michael Uini, who was just on campus in January, is a big priority. Deontay and Devontae Armstrong, the on 300 twins out of Ohio, were just on campus, big priority. So those are the guys that I can just rattle off the top of my head. JR says, any reason why Jim Harbaugh does not recruit more? Jim Harbaugh picks and chooses his times to recruit, but when he does recruit, when guys are in for visits or he does get out on the road, he makes big impressions. I still think Jim Harbaugh is the best closer on the staff, but he does let his staff do a lot of the heavy lifting. Jack Hell says, where do we stand with the Providence Day duo, Channing Goodwin and Jordan Shipp? I think Michigan's still really high up there for Goodwin. Obviously, he's a legacy recruit, so I'd be surprised if he's not in the class. In Michigan, I would say is probably top 3 for Jordan Shipp. No official list on his end, but I would say Michigan is right up there. Mike Gee says, EJ, go blue. Can you comment on Michigan's attempt at getting any cornerback or D-line depth out of the portal down the stretch here? Still a possibility. We're kind of monitoring it, so we'll see if some options pop up, but I think cornerback is more likely. Looks like that is everybody, guys. Thank you so much for joining the show. As always, like our video and subscribe to the Wolverine. Helps me get out in front of other Michigan fans. Definitely helps with the algorithm. And subscribe to the Wolverine.com for just $29.99 until August 31st of 2023. I will be back out on the road tomorrow, so expect some great content over at the Wolverine. And see you guys next week for another Wolverine Live.